Hello everyone, tonight we're going to slip into the quiet, watery maze of Venice, not the postcard-perfect version with gondoliers singing love songs to selfie sticks, but the gritty, creaky underside that smells like salt, smoke, and sawdust. You're about to spend a full day in the life of a Venetian gondola repairman. And no, it's not glamorous. You'll wake up cold, breathe in centuries of wood dust, and possibly end your shift soaked in canal water. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a week. The splinters alone would send you packing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And I do love to know where you're rewatching from. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You wake up to the sound of dripping water and the creak of an old shutter tapping the window frame. Venice doesn't do alarm clocks, just moisture. Everything is damp. Your mattress sags like an overcooked lasagna noodle. The blanket you tossed off at midnight is now somewhere near your feet, cold and vaguely fish-scented. Welcome back to your rented room above a canal-side workshop. Your ceiling is stained in faint brown rings, each one tracing the memory of a past leak. You've stopped counting. The floorboards groan as you swing your feet over the side of the bed and stand, immediately stepping on a curled-up sanding rag. Your toes are now sticky with varnish. It's 6:12 and you shuffled to the single window. Outside, a foggy swirl hangs over the canal like someone spilled a giant pot of milk. You can barely see the next building, which might be good. Your neighbor tends to wander around shirtless with his pigeons. As you get dressed, your hands instinctively reach for the layered uniform of your trade, a soft, faded linen shirt, dark trousers stained with paint, and the same canvas apron you've been wearing since 2003. It smells like warm wood, sea brine, and espresso. You pause for a moment, tying the apron behind your back like a blacksmith preparing for battle. Because in a way, that's what this is. A gondola repairman isn't just a woodworker. You're a carpenter, an engineer, a painter, a part-time therapist, and occasionally a detective. Especially when someone insists they don't know how the entire bow of their gondola got cracked in half. Downstairs, the workshop is still. Your tools hang on the wall like sleeping soldiers, planes, chisels, mallets, a foot-powered lathe you haven't dared using years after it flung a chunk of oak into your shoulder. You eye the woodpile boards of fir, larch, and walnuts stacked in careful rows. That walnut's for a high-end customer. You haven't touched it yet, just in case they ghost you like the German art dealer did last winter. Outside, the canal gurgles softly. A rat scurries across your dock, making eye contact like it owns the place. Which it might. You step over a half-finished gondola hull resting on trestles, giving it a soft pat like checking in on an old friend. Her name's Bianca. You name them all. They deserve that much. The air smells of tidewater, tar, and the faintest trace of black mold. You inhale deeply anyway. It's yours. Your stomach growls. Breakfast is a stale biscotto and yesterday's coffee, reheated on a dented tin burner. There's a cafe 2 bridges away, but your stomach doesn't love walking that early. Still, you need to head out soon. The tide's rising, and the campo gets slippery if you wait too long. You pour the coffee into a chipped enamel cup and sip. It's hot, bitter, and slightly gritty. Perfect. Outside, the fog is starting to lift. You make your way through a crooked alleyway, dodging puddles and mop buckets. Laundry lines overhead drip gently onto your shoulders. Someone's underpants may or may not have landed on your head last week. You don't talk about it. A few minutes later, you reach the campo. There's a cafe already buzzing. A gondolier shouts something in dialect to the owner about a clogged bilge pump. The espresso machine hisses like a dragon. You nod at the group of 9 gathered at the corner table, most older than you, all with hands rougher than a barnacle-covered piling. High tide today, one says, without looking up. Again, says another, lighting a cigarette that smells like roasted algae. Someone cracks a joke about a missing paddle, and the whole table chuckles like it's the funniest thing they've ever heard. You chuckle too. It's not funny, it never is. But that's the point. Your friend Marco waves you over. Did you hear about Lorenzo's gondola? You shake your head. Snap the forcola clean off, blames his nephew, kid's 15. Probably leaned on it trying to impress a Danish girl. You make a mental note to check your own forcolas later. The oarlocks are delicate, curved like sculpture, and if one breaks mid-ride, you're not getting a 5-star review. Worse, the gondolier might tell everyone you made it. As the fog thins, a watery orange glow begins to bounce off the canal stones. The city slowly wakes up around you, gondolas gliding past. Water taxis honking, someone already yelling about a misplaced crate of tomatoes. You toss back the last sip of your coffee and wipe your hands on your apron. It's time. Time to return to the workshop. Time to coax wood into impossible curves. Time to argue with iron clamps, with warping planks, with the ghosts of old craftsmen whispering, "You're doing it wrong." And maybe, if the tide stays friendly and your apprentice shows up sober, you'll finish the repairs on Bianca by nightfall. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we have to wrestle with the day's first task, getting that broken oarlock to hold. The campo is still buzzing behind you as you trudge back toward your workshop. A man yells something about a missing boat hook, and someone else is already sweeping pigeon feathers off their doorstep with a broom older than your last apprentice. Venice isn't a city so much as a community of stubborn, soaked survivors. And if you're part of this club, you've got two things: back pain and opinions. You cross a footbridge slick with sea spray, duck under a laundry line, and sidestep a cat so perfectly Venetian it probably pays rent. Then it's down the alley, past your landlord's peeling shrine to St. Mark, and through your warped blue door. The air inside your shop is cooler than outside, and it hums with the quiet potential of wood. Not new wood is suspicious. Too green, too light, too obedient. No, your wood is seasoned, storied, and slightly resentful, just like you. You light an oil lamp mostly for the drama. There's electric lighting, but it buzzes and flickers and makes your work feel like a dentist's office. You like to pretend it's 1580 minus the plague. Your first order of business? The forcola. It's a deceptively beautiful thing, a kind of asymmetrical oarlock, but also a sculptural masterpiece. It holds the gondolier's oar and allows them to maneuver with alarming grace. If Venice is a dance, the forcola is the pivot point. And yours, well, it's split right down the middle like a tourist sandal in August. You sigh. This one belongs to Enzo, a third-generation gondolier with the patience of a caffeinated bee. He dropped it off yesterday with a shrug and the helpful comment, "It just broke." You'd love to see his rowing technique. The replacement needs to be made from walnut, shaped entirely by hand, and match the original curve down to the millimeter. No pressure. You pull the pattern down from your wall. It's traced onto parchment, faded and creased. You lay it gently on the bench like a doctor checking an old x-ray. Then you select a walnut block from your stash and eye it like it owes you money. "You better not split," you mutter. As you begin carving, the shop fills with the sweet, spicy smell of fresh walnut. Every chip that curls away from your chisel feels like progress until your apprentice bursts through the door, late and breathless. "Sorry." He pants, skidding on the stone floor. "I overslept. Again." You just grunt. This is Pietro. 16, enthusiastic, and capable of sanding his own thumb if unsupervised. He's wearing a hoodie with a cartoon line on it and sneakers with glowing soles. You miss the days when apprentices came dressed like tiny wizards. "Grab the rasp," you tell him. "And don't touch the walnut." He salutes and immediately trips over a coil of rope. You glance at the ceiling. If St. Joseph is listening, he's laughing. Outside, the canal splashes softly. You can hear a gondolier practicing a mournful tune on an accordion. Either that or strangling it. Pietro starts sanding a support beam. It's the wrong beam, but at least it's wood. You try to focus. As you work the curve of the forcola, your mind drifts. Every curve has a reason, sharp turns for shallow canals, subtle indents for different rowing styles. No two gondolas are the same. That's the rule. They're asymmetrical on purpose, a quiet rebellion against symmetry. That off-balance design lets them glide straight despite being rowed from one side. Historians still debate whether the gondola is curved developed for practical navigation or symbolic reasons. Some say it mimics the tilt of Venice itself, always leaning into the water, always adjusting. Others say it's just what worked best in a city where left turns can mean the difference between a romantic ride and crashing into a fish market. You carve for hours, occasionally pausing to sip tepid water from a dented metal cup. Pietro hums a pop song under his breath until you give him the look. He switches to silence. Good boy. Eventually, the forcola starts to take shape. You sand it carefully, testing the fit with your fingers, smoothing out the imperfections like a barber working a straight razor. It's satisfying in that you'll never be rich doing this kind of way. Then the door bangs open again. It's Enzo. How's my girl? He asks, grinning. You hold up the half-finished piece. Still growing. He squints. It looks skinny. It's not for rolling pasta, you reply. Pietro snorts. Enzo shrugs and heads out, whistling a tune that's somewhere between opera and insult. The moment he's gone, you glance around and whisper, okay, time for the test. You retrieve an ancient forcola from under a bench. It belonged to a legendary gondolier known as Bruno the Whisper. No one ever heard him speak, but his boat moved like it was possessed. Some say he made a deal with the sea witch. Others claim he was just very, very focused. You place your new forcola next to Bruno's and compare the angles. Not perfect, but close. Close enough that no one but Bruno would notice. And Bruno's been dead for 60 years. You pause for a moment, then rub a bit of lampblack into the grain, just for luck or superstition. Hard to tell the difference in Venice. As the morning fades into midday, the shop grows warmer, scented with fresh wood, old varnish, and the faintest trace of Pietro's spicy cologne. You let yourself smile just a little. The job's not done, but it's moving. The forcola rests on your bench like a sculpture now, ready to cradle the motions of some loud-mouthed gondolier through fog, tourists, heartbreaks, and maybe 1 or 2 marriage proposals. You look down at your hand scraped, nicked, and coated in walnut dust. Yep, it's a good morning. The sun's higher now, casting golden lines across the canal and warming the damp stones outside your workshop door. Gondolas drift past with that signature hiss and gurgle, their black holes cutting the water like knives made of silence. It's a comforting sound like rain on canvas or shuffling cards in a quiet room. You step outside and take a deep breath. It smells like salt, moss, warm wood, and fish that have made poor life choices. The gondoliers are out in force now, most of them already yelling, singing, or posing for photos like it's part of their job. But unlike them, your gondolas don't move. They wait. Especially the ones that are broken, soaking in shame at the edge of your dock like dogs that shoot a shoe. You head back inside and cast your eyes over the day's to-do list written in pencil on a plank of wood, because paper has a tendency to vanish in the city. First on the list, finish dismantling the gondola that came in yesterday, with the warped stern and a suspicious red stain near the prow. Could be wine. Could be marinara. Could be something you really don't want to think about. You approach the boat. It's perched on a pair of trestles, long and narrow like a resting sea serpent. Her name is Rosa. She's seen better days. The side planks have started to separate from the ribs, likely from poor maintenance, careless docking, or some gondolier who thinks bumping into walls is just part of the Venetian experience. You run your hands along the hull and mutter, "You poor thing." Pietro thinks you're talking to him. You're not. Time to get to work. The workshop is a mix between a woodworker's dream and a hoarder's nightmare. Chisels, planes, and saws hang on one wall while the other is stacked high with salvage parts, old oarlocks, broken seating frames, a metal ferro or two, and a disturbing number of velvet cushions that have seen things. You grab your favorite pry bar nicknamed Lucretia for reasons you no longer remember and begin loosening the paneling near the stern. With every squeak and crack of separating wood, you feel a strange satisfaction. You're peeling back time, layer by layer. Pietro hovers nearby. Want me to help? You glance at him. You know what a stern post is? No? Exactly. He backs off wisely. As you lift one of the planks, a cloud of dry dust floats into the air, followed by the unmistakable scent of ancient mildew and varnish. You cough, then laugh. Rosa, you've been hiding mold like it's treasure. It takes over an hour to fully strip the damaged section, exposing the skeleton of the gondola, the internal ribs. crossbeams and bracing struts that hold it all together. Some are salvageable. Others look like breadsticks left out in the rain. You make notes on what needs replacing with a stub of charcoal directly onto the boat frame. No fancy apps here. If the charcoal disappears, you're out of luck. Which has happened several times. Venice doesn't care for modernity. It barely tolerates electricity. You lost a whole week of work once when a rat chewed through the wire to your sander. The rat survived. The sander did not. As midday approaches, you push open the shutters to let in more light and nearly fall into the canal. There's a gondola passing by, way too close. The gondolier grins as if it's a friendly hello, not an assault. You could knock next time, you mutter. He waves cheerfully. Pietro waves back, then ducks when you glare at him. Back inside, you prep your tools for the next task, replacing one of the interior ribs. You select a piece of seasoned fir, not too dry, not too green, and begin shaping it by hand with your spokeshave. The rhythmic sound of metal against wood becomes its own kind of music. Scrape, shave, test the curve, scrape, shave, curse, repeat. The gondola's internal structure is a marvel of design, slightly curved, slightly off balance, just like the city that invented it. Historians still debate whether this asymmetry was born of necessity or obsession. One theory claims it was to counteract the single-oar rowing style. Another insists it was simply to make the boats look more dramatic in the moonlight. You tend to believe both. In Venice, drama is practical. As the rib begins to take shape, Pietro tries to sneak a sandwich. You ignore it until you hear the crinkle of wax paper. Crumbs in the varnish again, you warn. He pauses mid-bite and solemnly places the sandwich on a shelf far away from anything important. You nod. Progress, you clamp the new rib into place and step back. It fits, mostly. A little persuasion with the mallet makes it fit better. A lot of persuasion might make it worse. You go easy. Then you reach for the glue. Not just any glue, your special blend of resin, pine sap, and patience. It smells like the inside of an antique shop during a thunderstorm. As you apply the mixture, you remember something your old mentor used to say: a good gondola repairman knows how to fix the boat without erasing the story. You didn't understand it back then. Now you do. Every scratch, every patch, every uneven rib, it all tells someone's story. A drunk proposal. A tourist who dropped their phone into the canal. A gondolier who got distracted by gelato and scraped a wall. It's all in the wood. By the time you finish applying the glue and clamping the new rib into place, your back aches and your knees pop like bubble wrap. Pietro is sweeping up, kind of. Mostly pushing dust into artistic piles. You wipe your hands on your apron and glance at the clock. Somehow it's already afternoon. The light has shifted, the sounds outside have changed. More laughter, more clinking glasses, the occasional accordion. You step outside again just to stretch. A gondolier sings something off-key. Someone throws bread to pigeons. The city smells like salt and espresso again. You lean against the door frame and let your eyes rest on the passing boats. Rose is going to float again. You'll see to it. But first, maybe it's time for lunch. The thing about lunch in Venice is that it's never just lunch. It's a ritual, a complaint session, and a small performance rolled into one. It's where old men argue about boat design and young ones pretend to listen. It's also the only time anyone agrees on anything. The anchovies taste better when paired with sarcasm. You grab your coat, mostly to hide the fresh glue stain on your shirt, and head out with Pietro trailing behind you like a seagull looking for crumbs. The two of you navigate the narrow alleys, stepping over puddles and dodging the kind of tourists who think GPS works on cobblestones. The osteria you choose isn't fancy. In fact, it looks like it might have been condemned several times and just ignored the paperwork. But it has good wine, a crooked table you've claimed as your own, and a waiter who pretends not to know your name but absolutely does. You slide into your usual seat with the kind of creak that suggests you re-part of the furniture. Pietro flops into the seat opposite you and immediately starts scrolling through something on his phone until you snap your fingers. No phones at the table, you say? He grumbles and pockets it because even in 21st century Venice, some traditions survive. The waiter arrives with 2 small glasses of red wine and a plate of marinated anchovies, thin slices of fennel, and a hunk of bread that could probably stop a crossbow bolt. You both eat in silence for a moment, letting the flavors settle and the muscles uncoil. The wine is tart and a little sour, just like most conversations you'll overhear here. A group of older men sit nearby, gesturing wildly about the rising water levels. "The stones on my front step were dry until last spring," one says. "The stones on your front step haven't been dry since Napoleon," another replies. You smirk and turn back to your food. Pietro finishes his plate in record time and leans back with a sigh. "Do you think Venice will ever just float away?" You glance out the window. The canal sparkles in the sunlight, deceptively peaceful. A gondola glides past, the gondolier standing tall, his striped shirt catching the breeze like a flag of misplaced confidence. "Maybe," you say. "Or maybe it'll all just sink a little every year until we refixing boats from scuba gear." He laughs. "Can you imagine sanding underwater?" You can, actually, and it's not a happy thought. Venice's slow sinking is no longer a theory, it's reality. The city subsides a few millimeters a year, while sea levels rise with casual menace. Historians still debate whether the Republic of Venice and all its past glory could be predicted this kind of future, or whether their obsession with grandeur blinded them to their own foundations literally crumbling. But for you, it's simpler. You don't fix the whole city. You just keep the gondolas afloat, one patch at a time. After lunch, you and Pietro linger a while longer, as is the local way. You nurse the last few sips of wine and eavesdrop shamelessly. A woman complains that her brother-in-law borrowed her fishing boat and came back with no fish and a broken oar. Someone else is arguing about whether tourists should be charged a separate price for espresso. They already are. No one wants to admit it. Eventually, you rise. Pietro groans like he's lifting a cathedral. "Back to it," you say. The streets are warmer now, echoing with laughter, and the occasional slosh of boat wakes against ancient stone. You pass a woman hanging laundry between 2 buildings, the sheets snapping in the breeze like defiant sails. Back at the shop, Rosa waits for you. She looks slightly more optimistic in the afternoon sun, if a boat can ever look optimistic. You get back to work, smoothing the last rib into place and checking the alignment of the hull. Pietro assists, this time without breaking anything. Progress is slow, sure, and dusty, but that's the point. Gondola repair is not about speed. It's about stubbornness. You climb into the hull to check for balance, shifting your weight slightly to test her lean. Gondolas are famously lopsided, intentionally so. They're built with one side longer than the other to counterbalance the single oar. You'd think it would feel wrong, but once you get used to it, it's like dancing on a tilted stage. The trick is knowing which way the music flows. "Why are they always black?" Pietro asks, handing you a clamp. "La," you reply, adjusting the brace. From the 1600s, too many gondoliers were painting theirs like carnival floats. Gold leaf, family crests. One had a painting of Neptune riding a dolphin. Sounds awesome. It was a mess. The Doge put his foot down. "Black only," Pietro frowns. "But not matte black, right?" You raise a brow. "This isn't a car showroom." You clamp the final rib and step out, stretching your back until something pops with a sound like a cork. There's still painting, varnishing, detail work, and prayers left to go, but Rosa is finally taking shape. Her bones are solid again. Her spirit, whatever boats have, is waking up. You look around the shop. Wood shavings coat the floor like confetti. Tools rest at odd angles. The light through the window has shifted into the golden hour. Pietro has found a stool and is scribbling something into a small notebook. You pretend not to notice. Maybe he's sketching. Maybe he's writing a poem about sanding. Stranger things have happened. You wipe your hands on your apron and take a long look at Rosa. Lunch was good. You murmured to no one in particular. And then to Pietro, "Let's heat the glue again. We've got more work to do." He groans, but he's smiling. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from working with your hands, especially when the thing in your hands smells like salt, pine, and old sea myths. Back inside the shop, the air has changed. It's warmer now, thick with the scent of wood dust and sun-baked varnish. Outside, the afternoon has settled in. The tourists are louder, the gondoliers are bolder, and somewhere, someone is definitely drinking wine straight from the bottle. But in your shop, it's just you, Pietro, and a growing pile of sawdust. You set down your chisel and glance over to the sideboard you started carving last week. It's been waiting patiently, leaning against the wall like a bored guest at a dull party. The edges are rough, still wearing the marks of your coarsest plane, but today might be the day you give it shape. Proper shape. Not just technically curved, but something that would make your old teacher nod silently and walk away. That's how you knew you'd done well, no compliments. Just a nod and an exit. Pietro's on sweeping duty again, which really means redistributing the dust from one pile to another. But at least he's trying. He hums something off-key as he nudges a coil of rope out of the way, sending a family of startled spiders retreating to the back corner, where you're pretty sure they hold council meetings. You return to the sideboard and run your hands along it, checking for warps. The surface is rough, the grain slightly misaligned, typical of larch that's been too dry for too long. It'll need reshaping, maybe a steam box later. But first, you decide to start shaving the long curve that defines the gondola's side. You clamp it down and pull out your long-handled plane, the heavy one with the oak grip and the iron blade that always reminds you of your grandfather's teeth, rugged and unforgiving. With each pull, a smooth ribbon of wood curls away, falling to the floor like a lazy feather. You start to settle into a rhythm. Shaft. Shaft. Thump. Pietro has dropped something. You look up. What was that? He shrugs. The mallet. Why? It rolled off the bench. Why was it on the bench? He shrugs again. You sigh and return to planing. But the rhythm is gone now, so you give up and decide to explain the sacred geometry of the gondola instead. You know why we use so many different kinds of wood? You ask. Pietro blinks. Because you have a lot of leftovers? No, you say, only mildly insulted. Because each part of the gondola needs to behave differently. The bottom's made of oak, strong, heavy, holds the shape. The sides, larch, flexible. The frame, fir, light but strong. He nods slowly. So, like a lasagna, you blink. Sure, you say. Exactly like a lasagna, he grins. Layers, you don't correct him. Honestly, it's not a bad analogy. Historically, every gondola was made from exactly 8 different types of wood. Oak, larch, fir, cherry, walnut, elm, lime, and mahogany. Each one had its role, its weight, its grain direction. Together, they formed a boat that was balanced not by symmetry, but by controlled imbalance. A philosophy Venice seems to apply to just about everything. Historians still debate whether this tradition started out of necessity, just using what was available, or whether it was a deliberate reflection of Venice's fractured, beautiful nature. Some say the variety of wood symbolizes the variety of people who built the city. Others claim it was just a really fancy way of saying, this is what we had lying around. Either way, it works. You return to carving, easing into the sideboard's curve with long, patient strokes. Pietro watches, surprisingly quiet now. Maybe he's finally absorbing something. Or maybe he's just trying to figure out how you make the blades sing like that. After a while, he asks, how do you know when you're done? You pause. It's a good question. The boat tells you, you say. Or your hands do. You run your palm over the surface and feel the difference between almost and right. Sometimes it takes a day. Sometimes it takes a week. He raises an eyebrow. So ... guessing? You chuckle, refined guessing. The sideboard takes shape under your fingers, the wood gradually losing its sharp edges and adopting that soft, elegant slope that defines every gondola's silhouette. It's the kind of curve that looks accidental until you try to replicate it. Then it becomes a test of patience and muscle memory. Outside, you hear the familiar thump of a gondola docking hard against stone. A splash, a curse in dialect, and then a loud, unapologetic laugh. Someone probably misjudged the turn near the fish market again. It happens daily. Tourists don't realize that canals are highways. Every time someone tries to take a selfie while steering, someone else ends up in the water. You glance at Pietro. Someday that'll be you, you say. He looks horrified. Falling in? No, laughing at the guy who did. He brightens. Nice. With the carving done for now, you step back and admire your work. The board fits the hull's line like it was born to live there, which, in a way, it was. It just didn't know it yet. You wipe your hands on your apron and look around. The shop is a mess again. Wood shavings everywhere, half-used tins of varnish on every surface. Clamps hanging from places you're pretty sure weren't designed to hold clamps, and yet it feels right, like the boat. Not tidy, not perfect, just balanced. You sit down on the edge of the dock, legs dangling over the water, and let the late afternoon sun warm your shoulders. Pietro joins you, chewing on something he definitely wasn't supposed to eat in the shop. The canal ripples gently. A fish jumps. You both stare at it for a full minute before Pietro breaks the silence. Do gondolas ever sink? You pause, then reply, only if they're badly built. He considers that. Then, so ... Never yours? You smile. Not yet. You never really get used to the arsenal. Even after all these years, it still feels like entering a sleeping dragon's den, a dragon made of brick, rope, and the smell of drying wood. You leave Pietro behind to organize the tool shelf. Organize the tool shelf, which mostly means he'll spend an hour trying to stack clamps into a pyramid. In the meantime, you row upriver toward the legendary arsenal of Venice, the ancient naval shipyard where the city's maritime power was born and where, by some miracle of stubborn bureaucracy, the best wood in the lagoon is still stored. You paddle standing up in a little sandalo, a workboat much squatter than a gondola, but far more forgiving when you sneeze. The canal is calm today, interrupted only by the occasional wake of a water taxi speeding like it's trying to escape a parking ticket. As you row, your oar dips and glides through the green water, catching reflections of laundry lines and sun-bleached shutters. The arsenal's gates appear ahead, towering and crumbling in equal measure. A pair of stone lions watch as you approach. One's missing a chunk of ear. The other looks permanently unimpressed. This was once the heartbeat of Venetian naval might, where galleys were built in assembly line fashion centuries before Ford got the idea. Now it's quieter, reserved mostly for craftsmen, a few museum curators, and the occasional conspiracy theorist. You pull up at a dock that looks like it was last repaired during the French invasion. The guard knows you, or at least pretends to. He waves you in with a grunt and a toothpick still stuck between his molars. Inside, it's cool and shadowed. Stacks of lumber rise around you like an abandoned cathedral, towering slabs of oak, larch, and fir stacked by species, grain, and a system no one fully understands anymore. You take a deep breath. It smells like history and termites. You're here for gondola wood, specifically a few pre-aged lengths of fir and a plank of walnut that's been sitting in storage since Pietro was in diapers. The man who oversees the inventory is Giorgio, who's about 105, wears the same wool cap year-round, and insists on licking his thumb before flipping through his clipboard. You again, Giorgio rasps. You still here, you reply. He grins, revealing a missing tooth and possibly part of a breadstick. What are you looking for this time? Something curvy? Aft rail and maybe a bit of decking. Need some fur that doesn't hate me. Giorgio points a crooked finger toward a pile that looks like it might collapse if you sneeze too hard. Back left. Took some stormwater last month, so don't blame me if it's cranky. You nod and head that way, stepping over rope coils and ducking under a dangling lantern. The fir boards are long, pale, and heavy. You run your fingers along their grain, looking for one with a steady, clean line, no warping. No knots pretending to be charming. You find one, maybe two. Then you spot it, the walnut. It's darker than the rest, nearly black in places, with a tight, elegant grain that hums with potential. You tap it gently. It gives off a rich, hollow tone like the wood itself remembers what it's like to sing. That one's been sitting 20 years, Giorgio calls out. Told the art school they couldn't have it. Why not? They wanted to make a bench. He spits. A bench. You agree that this is blasphemy. A walnut plank like this isn't for sitting. It's for building something that glides, something that turns heads and keeps secrets. Historians still debate whether gondola builders of the past used only the finest cuts for important clients, or if it was simply a matter of luck and good weather. Some say the best wood was always reserved for gondolas used by the doge or high-ranking nobles. Others believe even lowly fishermen occasionally got a perfect plank if they knew how to charm a clerk. You don't charm Giorgio. You just give him a knowing nod and pass him a folded €5 note inside a sandwich wrapper. He takes it like it's a sacred right. Loading the lumber onto your boat is a careful operation. Fur is heavy but friendly. Walnut is moody. You balance both across the sandalo, tying them down with the precision of someone who's had wood fall into the canal before and still hears it splash in his nightmares. The return trip is slower, more cautious. The boat sits low in the water and the canal's ripples feel suddenly personal. You steer wide around tight corners and try not to scream when a water bus thunders past you with zero regard for artisan dignity. Back at the workshop, Pietro is exactly where you left him, except now the clamps are arranged into what looks like a medieval torture rack. "Please tell me you didn't break anything," you say. He gives you a hopeful thumbs up. You make a mental note to check every shelf later. You offload the wood together, gently stacking the new pieces in the drying rack by the back window. The walnut goes on the top shelf, where sunlight can remind it that life is beautiful. The fir rests below, calm and cooperative. You sit down on the edge of the bench and wipe the sweat from your brow with a scrap of sailcloth. Pietro flops onto the floor dramatically, sighing like a wounded soldier. "That was like 3 trees, he moans. "That was your weekly cardio." He groans louder. You glance over at the walnut plank. It's already starting to glow in the afternoon light, catching golden streaks in its grain. You can see it now, the curved edge of a gondola's seat back or maybe a decorative rail near the bow. Something smooth, regal, something that belongs on the water. You stand up and stretch. Outside, the sun is beginning to dip behind the terracotta roofs. The city glimmers, the water laps. The day is far from over, but the boat is waiting. And now you have the perfect wood to keep it alive. Evenings in Venice arrive slowly, like a gondola drifting in from some quieter century. The sun melts behind church domes and crumbling bell towers, and the golden light fades into something softer lavender skies, glowing windows, and canals that now reflect stars instead of tourists. But inside your workshop, the light doesn't change. You've got lamps with dull yellow bulbs that buzz like bees trapped in glass. It's not romantic, but it works. And that's all that matters. Rosa is waiting. Her ribbing is in place, her curves restored. Now comes the part no one thanks you for the sanding. Endless, meditative, soul-crushing sanding. You pull out your well-worn sanding block, already smoothed to the shape of your hand after years of labor. The block's wrapped in 120 grit paper that Pietro once called sandpaper for serious people. He was wrong, of course, but he meant well. You begin at the bow, working in slow, circular motions. The vibrations travel up your arm, into your shoulder, and settle in your spine like a stubborn memory. It's quiet except for the faint scrape-scrape rhythm of effort. Pietro helps by preparing the varnish to slow, sticky process that he performs with the exaggerated care of someone handling explosives. "Do you always sand this much?" he asks. "No, you lie." "Only when I want it to float." He thinks for a second. "So, always?" You give him the look. He retreats to the far bench, wisely. As you sand, your fingers memorize every detail. A slight dip here. A raised ridge there. You think about the passengers who'll never know how much work went into this. Tourists who'll step into Rosa wearing flip-flops and sipping overpriced Prosecco, never once imagining someone spent 3 hours just sanding the edge their purse will scuff. Still, it's not about them. It never was. The gondola is your conversation with time, your argument with decay, your way of saying, "Not yet." Venice doesn't preserve itself. It survives because of people like you, doing quiet work in crooked buildings with bad plumbing and great light. You pause for a moment and look down. The wood glows faintly under your hands, warm, smooth, breathing again. She's coming back, and here's where things get tricky. Because next comes the furrow. The ferro di prua to be exact. That long, curved blade of metal mounted on the bow of every gondola. It's more than decoration. It's ballast, counterweight, symbol, and mood all in one. It tilts forward like a question mark, curled at the top like a forgotten melody. Attaching it is part science, part prayer. You walk to the storage shelf where your spare ferry rests like museum pieces. There are old ones, some ornate, some plain, one that looks like it was forged from leftover cutlery. You pick a modern version, sleek but respectful, polished just enough to catch light but not blind anyone. Pietro hovers near the vise. Want me to drill the mount? You consider this? Then you consider Rosa. Not yet. You measure, remeasure, clamp, tap, mark. And finally, when the city outside begins to hum with dinner plates and laughter, you drill the pilot holes. The smell of metal and burnt wood fills the air. It's oddly comforting. You bolt the ferrule in place and step back. She's complete. Well, not quite. Still needs varnish, touch-ups, maybe a seat that doesn't wobble. But the structure, the soul, those are intact. The boat is a boat again. Pietro steps up beside you and nods slowly. She's pretty, he says. You nod too. She's strong. He glances sideways at you. Like you? Like you might be if you stop dropping mallets. He smirks. The final task of the night is cleanup. You sweep together a mountain of shavings that smells like a forest with regrets. Pietro collects the used sandpaper and resin, brushes and mutters something about how even elves would complain about this job. You smile. You're tired. Your hands hurt. Your shoulders ache. But it's the kind of tired you earn. As you walk up, the canal outside is a different world. The water reflects lanterns. The air smells of grilled fish, rosemary, and night. A gondola passes, its gondolier humming low and slow, like he knows how much noise a sleeping city can take. Pietro yawns. You going out tonight? He asks. You shake your head. My knees say no. Mine say pizza. You let him go, watching him disappear into the alley with the shuffle of youth trying not to admit it's tired. You stand there a while longer, leaning against the doorframe. Rosa rests behind you, proud and silent. The canal stretches in both directions like a memory with no clear beginning. You listen to the night, to the whispers of water, to the heartbeat of a city floating between centuries. And you think maybe tomorrow you'll start that restoration project. The one with the cracked hull and the customer who smells like pickled onions. Or maybe, if the tide's right, you'll just sand something and pretend you're making music. Either way, Venice will wait. Mornings after a late sanding session tend to arrive with the subtlety of a falling piano. Your knees crack like old furniture as you swing out of bed, your back protests every angle, and your fingers still carry phantom splinters. The only part of you that feels remotely refreshed is the ankle you forgot to use yesterday. You shuffle to the window, push open the warped shutters, and take a long breath. It smells like tidewater, espresso, and wet marble. A church bell is already ringing, not because it's time for anything important, but because someone probably leaned on the rope again. A seagull screams from a rooftop. Somewhere, a dog barks at a gondola as if it's personally offended. You rub your face, stretch your arms, and whisper to yourself, another day, another boat that refuses to cooperate. Your workshop is still dark when you arrive. Rosa waits in the gloom like a queen in exile. You flick on the lamp. The light falls across her hall, and even with the varnish still unfinished, she gleams. Today's task, detail work. That means rail trims, trasto di mezzo fittings, and the small seat supports tourists somehow managed to damage more than any structural part of the gondola. You'd think people were sitting down with chainsaws. You pull out your smaller chisels, each honed to near surgical precision, and your leather apron with the mysterious stain that no one wants to talk about. Pietro arrives 5 minutes later, yawning into his hoodie, carrying 2 coffees. He hands one to you with shaky reverence. Triple shot, he says. Because you looked like someone who dreams about sanding. He's not wrong. The detail work begins slowly. You take the walnut plank from yesterday and start shaping the armrest trim. It curves inward in that characteristic Venetian flourish, not just decorative, but ergonomic, or so the theory goes. Did they always add these little curls? Pietro asks, squinting at your carving. No, you reply. They started appearing more in the 1700s, status symbols. People liked their boats to look like furniture. So, flexing but on water? Exactly. Historians still debate whether these embellishments were expressions of wealth, regional fashion, or a desperate attempt to outdo rival gondoliers. Some say there was a secret competition among nobles. Whoever had the most elaborate armrest, trim got to pick the opera for carnival season. Others suggest the designs were simply leftovers from skilled woodworkers who couldn't stop themselves from showing off. Honestly, you relate. The trim shavings fall in tight curls, soft and fragrant. You blow one away from your nose and sneeze into your elbow. Walnut, you mutter. Too elegant to be safe. Pietro is tasked with oiling the brass seat mounts today. It's a low-risk operation unless he decides to juggle them, which he tries once. Do that again and the brass goes in your seat, you say. He bows solemnly and returns to work. The afternoon sun creeps in through the high windows. The light is slanted and golden, and it makes everything look a little more magical than it really is. You take this as a sign to finish your carving and move on to attaching the trasta di mezzo, the center bench that tourists assume is there for romance, but is more often used to hold backpacks and water bottles. As you test the fit, a loud knock comes from the door. You both freeze. Pietro whispers, "Customer?" You whisper back, "Possibly worse, Inspector." You open the door slowly. It's neither, it's Ermenio. Ah yes, that Ermenio. He's a gondolier from across the canal. 60-something, suspicious of everyone under 40, and proud owner of a gondola named Lucia that he claims was blessed by a priest and once used by Sting. He steps inside with his usual flare gold chain, sunglasses, and an attitude that suggests every moment is a performance. "You busy?" he asks. You glance at your bench, your tools, your apprentice currently trying to balance 3 bolts on a chisel. "Not at all," you deadpan. He grins. "Good, because Lucia has sprung a leak." "Of course she has." You ask where. He points somewhere vague. "Near the middle, or the back, or maybe the side." "Helpful," you say. "Is the boat in the water?" "Obviously." "Is the leak above the waterline?" "It's not under." You close your eyes. "So it's in the air?" He nods. "That's what I said. You promised to stop by later." He insists Lucia is sensitive and needs a gentle touch. Pietro offers to go in your place, but you both know that would end with more leaks, possibly tears. After Ermenio leaves, you and Pietro collapse into chairs, sipping the last of the lukewarm coffee. "Does anyone know what they're doing?" Pietro asks. "Not really," you reply. "We just do it better than most." With the fittings installed and Rosa starting to look like her old self, you take a few minutes to walk her length, running your hand over every edge. The wood hums softly, the metal fittings gleam, and the floor planks are firm. She's nearly there. One more day of varnish and tuning, and she'd be back in the water, sliding past cafes and churches, carrying newlyweds and grumpy aunts, maybe even someone who will notice how well she rides. Maybe. But you don't do it for that. You do it because Venice deserves boats that don't complain. By now, Rosa feels more like a roommate than a project. She's been with you all week, slowly revealing her needs, her quirks, and her little structural secrets, like a house guest who only admits the plumbing doesn't work after you've unpacked your suitcase. Today is all about the finish. The last step. The varnish. There's a superstition in your line of work maybe passed down from older generations, maybe invented on the spot, that you don't call a gondola ready until she's touched the water again, because wood remembers. And just because she looks good in the shop doesn't mean she'll behave on the canal. You prep the varnish with the slow, meditative movements of someone about to paint the Sistine Chapel if the chapel were floating and full of tourists with the lotto. Pietro watches like he's afraid to breathe too loudly. The blend is your own, a mixture of traditional marine varnish, aged linseed oil, and a few drops of something your grandfather called gondola spice. No one's sure what that actually was, and you've never told Pietro. You might not even know yourself. But the smell is unmistakable sun-warmed wood, citrus, and just a whisper of sea air. You begin at the stern, working the varnish into the grain in long, steady strokes. The brush glides easily, leaving behind a warm amber sheen that makes the black hull shimmer like a still canal at night. This part always looks easy, Pietro mutters, holding the second brush. It's the most unforgiving step, you say. If you rush it, the whole boat ends up looking like a melted candle. He takes the warning seriously, rare for him. Together, you work your way around Rosa, varnishing her in sections. It's a kind of dance. You move in sync, passing brushes, checking light reflections, and catching drips before they harden into tragedy. Why black? Pietro asks again. This is the third time. You sigh again. Because the Doge said so. But why still black? You pause. Because tradition. Because every gondola is a shadow of the one before it. Because it makes the brush shine. Because tourists expect it. Take your pick. Historians still debate whether the black color was purely a matter of regulation or had something deeper, a symbolic gesture, maybe, or a practical way to unify a chaotic fleet. Others suggest it was simply the cheapest way to cover up the wild colors people kept using. One nobleman supposedly painted his gondola bright pink with gold dolphins. He was fined twice. You shift your weight and stretch your back. The fumes are starting to settle in. I'm seeing stars, Pietro says. You're just hungry. Same thing. You take a break while the first coat sets, stepping outside for air that doesn't smell like victory and varnish. The canal is calm. A pair of ducks paddles by, unaware of how deeply philosophical their wake just made you feel. A man on a nearby balcony is trying to hang his laundry without falling off. He's failing. Inside, Rosa gleams. She's no longer just a project. She's a story retold with polish and muscle and glue that cost more than your rent. You think people will notice? Pietro asks softly. Probably not, you say, but she know. The second coat is trickier. The wood's slick now, and any slip of the brush leaves behind streaks like bad eyeliner. You go slow. You breathe. You try not to think about the time you spilled a full can of varnish into a customer's shoe. Do you ever miss building them from scratch? Pietro asks. You stop for a moment. That's a big question. Sometimes, you say, but repairing them feels more honest. Like admitting the world breaks things, but we can still fix them. Pietro nods, which is rare. He usually argues or jokes. But not today. You finish the final pass and step back. Rosa is beautiful. Not flashy, not brand new. But balanced, confident, ready. You check the alignment again, run a finger along the trim and feel nothing but smoothness. No snags, no regrets. Well? Pietro asks. You don't answer. Instead, you walk over to the open back door and motion for him to help. Together, you lift Rosa from her stand, slowly, carefully, like you're carrying the crown jewels across a rickety bridge. The dock creaks under your feet. The water laps gently. The sun is lower now, casting golden light that kisses every curve of the boat. You lower her in. She floats, perfectly. No lean, no wobble, no complaints. You both just stand there watching. Pietro whispers, she's breathing. You nod. She's back. The water rocks her gently. She sways, adjusts, finds her rhythm again. There's a quiet joy in watching something return to its purpose. Rosa glides a few feet from the dock, tied by a single rope. The varnish catches the fading light. The furrow glints like a wink. Pietro is grinning now, wide and real. Can I row her? You consider it, not a chance. He laughs. Fair, you return to the shop to clean your tools a little slower than usual. The day is done, but the work lingers in your muscles. In the air, in the quiet pride that doesn't need applause. Venice is still out there singing, shouting, sinking just a little. But Rosa is floating. And that's enough. The next morning arrives with a particular kind of stillness, one you only get in Venice before the city fully wakes. No footsteps on the stones yet, no boat horns. Just the gentle slosh of canal water licking the walls like a sleepy cat. You're already dressed when the church bells start chiming, not for piety. For rhythm. The bells keep time here. They tell you when the tourists will start asking for directions to San Marco and when the baker will set out his still steaming loaves. You head to the dock, coffee in one hand, leftover walnut dust still clinging to your sleeves. And there she is, Rosa, floating like she never left. Her hull catching the early morning light in long, even glimmers. You lean on the railing, sip your bitter coffee, and allow yourself the tiniest smirk. You did it again. Pietro appears behind you, hair wild, hoodie on inside out. Still here? He asks, rubbing his eyes. She's not going to row herself. He squints at the boat. We're taking her out. We're giving her a test drive, you say. Can I? No. You untie the rope, climb into Rosa with the casual grace of someone who has absolutely fallen in before, and signal for Pietro to toss the oar. He does so with surprising accuracy. You place the flat blade into the forcola, the carved wooden oarlock that looks more like sculpture than hardware. Every forcola is different, custom-made to the gondolier's stroke, height, and bad habits. Rosa's is old, oiled smooth from years of use, its shape still responsive to the smallest shift in your grip. You push off. And just like that she glides. Not just moves, glides like velvet across marble, like butter on warm bread. Like a whispered secret escaping through a keyhole. Pietro claps once, then pulls out his phone to film. Put that away, you bark. This is sacred. He laughs, but he does it. You steer Rosa gently down the canal, past shuttered windows and sleeping cats, past the rusted iron hooks still holding flower pots from last spring. The canal is narrow here. The oar barely fits its full arc. But Rosa handles it like a dancer on a tightrope, tilting, correcting, finding her balance with every stroke. You remember the first time you rode a gondola. You were too cocky, too fast. You slammed into a floating garbage bin, and the locals laughed for 2 days. Since then, you've learned to treat the water like an old aunt, charming, temperamental, full of gossip. Pietro jogs ahead on foot, keeping pace along the canal walkways. Every few meters, he asks, "How does she feel?" You grunt, "Better than you do at 8 a.m. At the bend near Campo San Giacomo, you stop. You let Rosa coast. You lean on the oar and close your eyes for just a moment. And in that moment, Venice speaks. You hear the creak of old wood, the clink of a mooring line, a seagull's raspy song. You feel the current tug ever so slightly. The gondola shifts beneath your feet, alive, responsive, like a living memory. A gondola is never really finished. It's not a product. It's a partnership. Every dip in the canal, every scrape against a stone step, every grumpy passenger with a heavy backpack, she will feel it. And you will fix it. Historians still debate how much autonomy gondoliers had in designing their boats during the Republic era. Some say they were highly regulated, forced to use only approved materials and proportions. Others believe a quiet competition thrived beneath the surface, with families customizing their gondolas in secret. What's certain is that no two boats are truly identical. And no gondolier treats his like anyone else's. You begin your return trip, moving Rosa through the quiet waters like you're brushing the surface of a canvas. The oar swishes with the kind of rhythm Pietro will one day learn if he pays attention instead of filming. Back at the dock, he's waiting, pretending he's not impressed. She passed? He asks. You nod. She's ready. He hops down to help you tie her up again. As he loops the rope, he says, "What happens now?" You smile. She goes back to work, and she will. Probably this afternoon. Some hotel concierge will call, needing an extra boat for a last-minute reservation. Some couple will step aboard, holding hands, hoping Venice is as magical as the brochures promised. Rosa will carry them past palazzos and crumbling frescoes, under bridges named after saints, through waters that have seen centuries come and go. They won't notice the perfect balance in her hull. They won't thank the hands that repaired her ribs. But Rosa will know, and so will you. You and Pietro spend the rest of the morning polishing brass and touching up the forcola. He tries to convince you that Rosa deserves a painted nameplate. You remind him that if you had your way, the boats would come with owner's manuals and a swear jar for when they creak. By lunch, the city is fully awake. Gondoliers shout to each other across canals. Market vendors argue about zucchini prices. Someone drops a wine bottle and pretends it was empty. You lean on the railing once more, watching Rosa bob gently in her berth. She's not perfect, but she's strong. And she's home. And so are you. You know what they don't tell you when you become a gondola repairman? That half your job will involve listening to boat complaints as if they were old friends unloading their emotional baggage. And today? Today is complaint day. It starts with Carlo. Carlo arrives like a storm cloud, fast-moving, slightly damp. He doesn't to tie up his gondola so much as crash it into the dock and shout, "She's doing that thing again." Before even stepping off, you sigh. What thing? Carlo throws up his hands. She leans. She's supposed to lean, not like this. She leans like she's suspicious of me. To be fair, you're a little suspicious of Carlo, too. You go out to inspect. His gondola Lucinda, black as night and twice as moody, sits in the water at a slight angle. You bounce gently on the bow and feel it give just a little too much. Something's off. Pietro appears beside you holding a sandwich. You want the short answer or the expensive answer? He asks, chewing. I want the correct answer, you reply, ducking under the prow. You lift the fondella of the rear floorboard and peer into the keel. It's damp. Not soaked, but definitely sweating like it just heard bad news. You run your fingers along the inner curve, pressing into the ribs. There it is, a loosened frame brace. Probably worked itself free during a rough ride or an overly enthusiastic wedding party. You glance back up at Carlo, who is currently arguing with the pigeon. She needs bracing and resealing, you say. How long? 3 days. 3? 2 if you leave and don't touch anything. He grumbles but agrees, handing over the gondola like it's a borrowed child. You and Pietro wheel her into the shop, hoist her onto supports, and get to work. Here's where the day blurs. Because as soon as Lucinda is up, another gondolier shows up. Then another. Then someone from Murano brings in a weird hybrid boat that may or may not have originally been a bathtub. Each has a story. One complains of creaking in the middle of the night. One says his forcola is whispering threats. One swears his boat is cursed because the same couple gets seasick every time they ride it. You check, you hammer, you sand. Pietro starts a spreadsheet on a scrap of plywood. By lunchtime, the shop sounds like an orchestra warming up chisels, mallets, muttering in Venetian dialect. Is this normal? Pietro asks between tasks. For May? Yes, you reply. Do they tip? You laugh, only with guilt. Mid-afternoon, a man arrives with a gondola that looks like it lost a bet. The hull is sun-faded, the metalwork is mismatched, and the seat cushions appear to have been stolen from a dentist's office. He says it belonged to his grandfather. Can you bring it back? He asks softly. You don't say yes. You say, we can try. And that's enough. You lift the boat out of the water with ropes and prayer. It creaks ominously. Pietro holds his breath. You set it down on padded beams, and only then do you really look at it. Beneath the grime and decades of neglect, there's something there, a curve that still flows. A groove worn into the deck where a gondolier's foot must have stood for 30 years. You brush away a patch of dirt and see the ghost of black lacquer, dull but defiant. She's tired, you say, more to yourself than anyone. Pietro nods, but not done. You start with the deck, removing rotted planks. You replace a split strake with a piece of fur that's been waiting for this exact job. The bow needs realignment. The stern needs reimagining. It's not restoration, it's negotiation. You ask the boat what she needs, and if you listen closely, she tells you. Historians still debate how much gondola design has actually changed over the centuries. The general shape, the flat bottom, the elegant asymmetry, the forward curl of the ferro has remained almost identical since the 17th century. Some scholars believe this consistency is a reflection of Venice's own resistance to change, a kind of watery conservatism. Others argue it's just good design when something works, you don't mess with it. You tend to agree with the second group. And today is proof. As sunset bleeds through the workshop windows, you and Pietro are still covered in resin and sawdust. Your clothes smell like cedar and varnish. Your knees ache like they've been sending smoke signals to your brain. But the boats are coming back to life. Lucinda has her new brace installed. The bathtub hybrid is now slightly less terrifying, and the grandfather's gondola? It's standing tall, freshly planked and quietly proud. Pietro leans on the doorframe, sipping tea he probably forgot to sweeten. "Do you think boats dream?" he asks. You look around at the shapes, the shadows, the curves that have passed through your hands for years. Maybe you say, "But I think they remember more than they dream, and that's your job, to honor what they remember." You're halfway through your morning pastry when the hammer goes missing, not the cheap one, the good one. The hammer with the worn-down hickory handle and the head that always strikes just right. You look in the usual places. The bench, under Rose's seat, even inside the paint can you once mistook for your lunch container. No dice. Pietro. You shout. From somewhere deep in the back, "I didn't steal it this time," which means he definitely did. You find it 15 minutes later resting gently atop a half-finished model boat he's building out of scrap planks. You hold it up, silently. Pietro shrugs like an artist misunderstood. "I was testing weight ratios." You were building a toy. Research. You set the hammer back in its sacred place and glare just long enough to make your point. He gets back to sweeping sawdust into artistic little piles shaped like gondolas. Today's job is unique Giulietta, not the boat, the woman. Giulietta is 92, a former singer, former hat maker, and current local legend. Her family has owned a ceremonial gondola since 1890. It is used only once a year during the Festa della Senza, when the city reenacts Venice's symbolic wedding to the sea. And guess what? This year, the gondola's fells, the rare black cabin used for privacy and prestige, has cracked along its arch. You only get a handful of fells left in the city and even fewer still in use. So Giulietta comes to you. She arrives mid-morning, wearing sunglasses the size of soup bowls, walking with a cane she uses more like a baton. "I need your eyes and your hands," she announces, sweeping dramatically into the workshop. "And what does your gondola need?" you ask. She squints at you. Rescue. The boat is already docked nearby, floating with ancient dignity. Its lacquer is dull, its edges chipped, but it stands tall like an old duchess still commanding the room. You and Pietro step aboard carefully, mindful not to lean too hard on the fells. The crack is clear. It runs along the inner arch of the cabin roof like a hairline fracture in a porcelain teacup. Cosmetic, but dangerous. If it spreads, the entire structure could collapse. Giulietta leans over the dock, watching. "She carried 2 generations of weddings," she says softly, "mine included. The boat was late. I wasn't. You don't say anything. You just nod. You remove the fells with the delicacy of a museum curator. The supports creak as you lift, the curved wooden beams sighing under your grip. Back in the workshop, you laid out across padded horses and study the grain. The fells is made from walnut and cherry, 2 temperamental woods with very different ideas about how to age. You trace the crack with your finger, feeling where it dips, where it's beginning to splinter. "Can you fix it?" Pietro asks. You answer like you always do. "We'll try." Repairing a fells is unlike other gondola work. It's not just functional, it's symbolic. The cabins were once a mark of prestige, used by wealthy Venetians for privacy, for romance, for sneaking to meetings they weren't supposed to attend. They were painted black like the boats, but inside many were lined with fabric, decorated with crests, or etched with initials in places only a lover would see. Historians still debate whether the decline of the fells was due to government regulation, the rise of tourism, or the changing values of modern Venetians. Some say they simply fell out of favor, too heavy, too private, too complicated for a world obsessed with speed and selfies. Others suggest it was an act of quiet rebellion. No one wanted to be hidden anymore. You spend the next few hours sanding the cracks smooth, then cutting a thin inlay of new cherry wood to reinforce the arch. Pietro heats the glue while you press the sliver into place, using tiny clamps that look like surgical tools from a forgotten century. The smell of warm wood and old lacquer fills the air. "You know," Pietro says, watching you work, "we could build a new one." You stop, look at him. "We could, but this one knows things." He nods, like Giulietta. "Exactly." As the glue sets, you rub down the outer edges with a soft cloth soaked in boiled linseed oil. The cherry darkens instantly, blushing like it just remembered its past. Pietro whistles low. "She's gonna shine," he says. "She's gonna sing." You let the fells rest overnight, clamped, quiet, and dreaming of gondoliers long gone. The next morning, Giulietta returns, wearing a hat shaped like a question mark. "You didn't repaint it, did you?" "No, signora." "Good. A woman's wrinkles are her memoir." You reinstall the fells with Pietro guiding the supports. It slips back into place like it never left. The crack is invisible. The arch firm. The cabin whole again. Giulietta runs her fingers across the beam gently. Her hands are small, weathered, covered in rings and memories. "She's ready," she says. And so am I. As she boards her gondola, she turns back. "Next year, I want her to carry me and my great-granddaughter. If I'm lucky. If the boat's lucky, you say?" She laughs bright and sharp and pushes off into the canal, singing something from an old opera, off-key but full of soul. You watch her fade into the golden afternoon light. And for a moment, it feels like Venice remembers herself. Venice has rules. Written ones, unwritten ones, and those that seem to change depending on who's rowing and who's watching. But there is one rule every gondola repairman learns the hard way. Never trust the weather report. You step outside with your morning coffee and are instantly hit in the face with the cold slap of damp wind. The sky's that particular shade of gray that screams. Surprise flooding coming. Even though last night's news confidently said partly cloudy with a chance of romance. You glance at the canal. The water's higher than usual, lapping over the lower steps, nudging boats like a dog that wants to go out. Not yet high enough to panic, but just enough to make every dock creak like it's considering retirement. Pietro arrives moments later, wrapped in a jacket that's definitely not waterproof. "Wind woke me up," he mutters, rubbing his eyes. "Thought it was ghosts." "Could still be," you reply. You both head to the shop and start the morning ritual tools out. Benches wiped, mysterious screws from yesterday sorted into the ever-growing jar labeled. I bet your real focus is the gondola in the middle of the workshop, a newer model built just a few years ago and already misbehaving. Her name is Narina, and she was brought in with complaints of excessive yaw. Not a word people use often, but gondoliers can be poetic when their boats won't go straight. You set her on the stand and begin inspection. The hull's fine, the keel looks even. But the forcola, the elegant S-shaped oarlock, has a hairline crack at the base. "Well, there's your yaw," you say. Pietro frowns. "Does that mean it's possessed?" "It means someone leaned on it too hard. Or argued with it." He leans over. "Can we fix it? We'll do better. We'll remake it." And just like that, today becomes a forcola day. Now, making a forcola is an art form in itself. You don't just carve one, you coax it from the wood. Each is custom-made, shaped to the specific height, style, and habits of its gondolier. There's a reason the city has only a handful of true Rameri woodworkers who specialize in oars and oarlocks. You're not one officially, but you've trained with two of the best, and you've carved more than a few. You select a piece of aged walnut from your private stash wood that's been drying longer than Pietro has been alive. "This one?" he asks. You nod. "She deserves it." You sketch the profile with a soft pencil, letting the shape curve naturally from memory. The tall notch for resting strokes. The side cut for slowing down. The lower lip for backward paddling. It's all there, embedded in the flow. Pietro watches you like you're performing surgery. "You ever mess one up?" You smile. "Only when someone talks too much during carving." He shuts up wisely. You clamp the plank, take your gouge, and begin. Long, shallow cuts. The scent of walnut fills the air, warm, rich, a little sweet. You forget sometimes how much you love this part, just you, the wood, and the shape slowly emerging. Historians still debate the origin of the forcola's distinctive design. Some argue it evolved from Greek naval traditions, others from sheer Venetian trial and error. There's even a theory that its strange curves were inspired by violin scrolls. Venice, after all, has always been a city of luthiers and sailors. 3 hours in, the rough shape is there. Pietro rubs the surface with oil-soaked cloth as you fine-tune the edges. She's got good balance, he says. Like all the best liars, you mutter. You test an advice with an oar, mimicking the rowing motion. No wobble, no squeak, smooth glide. You both exhale. Outside, the skies turn to deeper gray. Rain starts, not a drizzle, but one of those Venetian downpours that feels like the city is emptying a teapot over your head. You move quickly to check the moorings. Water is sloshing up against the shop's entry steps now. The tide's not messing around. Should we start moving things? Pietro asks. Not yet, you say. We've got a few inches to spare. But just in case, you both lift Narina's hull onto the higher stand and place sandbags by the rear entrance. Pietro glances nervously at the canal. You ever worry the water's going to win? You pause. Every day, you admit. But it hasn't yet. And in this city, that counts as a victory. As the storm rumbles and water climbs, you return to the bench. The forcola is done. Finished with oil, polished to a deep brown shine, it looks like a question mark carved by a romantic philosopher. Pietro holds it reverently. Think she'll like it? She argue with it for a week. Then she love it. You wrap it in cloth and prep it for installation. Just before sunset, the rain slows. The tide begins to drop. A boat passes by outside, its gondolier singing softly, a half-heard tune that sounds like it's older than the city itself. You and Pietro sit on the stoop, steaming mugs in hand, watching the water recede inch by inch. You think Venice will still be here in 100 years? He asks. You look out at the shimmering surface, the leaning towers, the stubborn bridges. She fight, you say? And we'll keep fixing the things that help her float. You don't get a lot of days off when you fix gondolas for a living. Not because you can teach them, but because Venice has a funny way of inventing emergencies when you do. So when you tell Pietro, we're taking the morning off, his eyes go wide. Are you okay? Did a boat fall on your head? Do you have a fever? No, you reply. I just want to look at something that isn't broken. You head out together, wandering through alleys only locals know how to navigate, past laundry-strung courtyards and tiny shrines tucked into building corners. You walk until the city opens up into one of its quieter compass, where the noise is just footsteps and pigeons. Here lies something special, a gondola that hasn't touched water in decades. It's displayed under a canopy raised on stone blocks, quietly overlooked by most passers-by, no sign, no plaque. Just a ghost of craftsmanship. She's beautiful in that ruined, dignified, wave-peeling paint, warped rails, furrow dulled by weather and time. Pietro stares. She looks sad. She looks retired, you correct. You walk around her slowly. This gondola dates to around 1910, give or take. You recognize the older style, narrower build, more pronounced stern, a shape that speaks of pre-tourist Venice when the canals weren't filled with smartphones and Instagram proposals. The lines are sharper, less forgiving. Built for speed, for privacy, for purpose. She's from another time, you say? Back when gondolas didn't smile for photos. Pietro leans in to look at the undercarriage. No seat pads. Nope, no cup holders. You shoot him a look. Leave. He grins and doesn't move. This forgotten gondola is a reminder of what your job really is. Not just repair, not just preservation, but translation. You help old boats speak to a modern world. You remind them they still belong. Historians still debate just how much the gondola's role changed during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Some say it was the beginning of the decline when steamships took over transport and the gondola became a symbol instead of a solution. Others argue it was when the gondola truly became Venetian, no longer just a boat, but a floating ambassador of the city's romantic myth. You crouched near the bow. The furrow is rusted but intact, its 6 teeth representing the sisteri, the 6 districts of Venice. At the top, a stylized doge's cap curves toward the sky. This isn't decoration, it's identity. Do you think she misses the water? Pietro asks quietly. You pause. The question isn't silly. You felt it too. Maybe, you say. But maybe she's proud to rest. As you make your way back through the streets, you start pointing out things you normally rush past, the way the houses lean inward, as if whispering secrets across the alley, the little archways bricked up centuries ago for reasons no one remembers. A door waist-high that once led to a canal landing that no longer exists. Everything in this city was made for water, you say. Even the things that haven't seen it in years. By the time you return to the shop, the air smells like lunch tomato sauce and rosemary floating in from a neighbor's window. Pietro disappears to retrieve sandwiches, and you take a few quiet minutes alone. You sit on the workbench and look around. At the tools hanging from pegs, their handles shaped by your grip. At Rosa, still gleaming, tied up outside and waiting. At the chalk sketches on the wall, half-finished outlines of future boats that may or may not ever get built. And at the small, crooked photo near the door, your grandfather, standing beside a gondola of his own, holding a chisel like a conductor's baton. He's the reason you started. The reason you kept going when your first few builds leaked more than they floated. He used to say, a gondola doesn't just carry people, she carries pride, quiet, heavy, floating pride. You hear the door creak. Pietro returns with food and one mystery pastry. It's either custard or anchovy. You stare at it. Those aren't the same, he shrugs. Only one way to find out. You leave it on the table like a challenge and unwrap your sandwich. While you eat, the afternoon shifts again. A soft wind rustles the edges of your plans. A tourist walks by and pauses to stare at the tools on the wall. You don't wave. You just let them look. Maybe they're imagining what it's like to fix history with your hands. Maybe they just like the smell. But for a moment they stay. And Venice keeps floating. You wake to the sound of hammering. Not the good kind, the kind you control. No, this is the panicked, clumsy clanging of someone trying to fix something without permission. Which in your world is basically a felony. You rush to the shop in your slippers, heart pounding like an old outboard motor, and there he is. Pietro. Standing on a stool, holding your second-best chisel backwards, trying to adjust a decorative piece on Rosa's stern. He freezes. I was fine-tuning. You were fine-ruining. You snatched the chisel and motioned dramatically to the door. That piece has been on Rosa since before you were born. It was loose. It's supposed to wiggle. It's decorative, not aerodynamic. Pietro slinks off, muttering something about restorative instinct. You pour yourself a much-needed espresso and thank whatever ancient boat spirit protected Rosa from youthful ambition. Later, after calming your blood pressure with caffeine and judgmental stares, the two of you turn your attention to today's actual project, a training gondola, not for tourists, for gondoliers in training. You see, while Venice may be all romance and ring shots to the outside world, gondoliering is a licensed profession, regulated to the bone. You don't just grab an oar and start rowing people around. You train, you test, you memorize dozens of canals. You learn balance, etiquette, the appropriate jokes per ride. There's a guild involved. There's even a rowing exam. And yes, there are test boats like the one sitting in your shop now. This one's seen better days. Scraped paint, softened rails, warped hull. It's the maritime equivalent of a gym towel that's been through too many cycles. Still, it's got potential. And with a few days' work, she'll be rowing rookies up and down the canal with enough wobble to keep their egos in check. You start by flipping her over, propped on padded horses. Pietro follows your lead quiet this time, probably still smarting from the stern decor debacle. Why not just make a new one? He asks. Because no one trains properly in a brand new boat, you reply. They'll treat it too carefully. He nods like that made any sense, which, in your world, it does. You start sanding. There's something meditative about sanding old gondola hulls. The way the grit hums against the wood. The smell of dust and salt and thyme. You both work in rhythm, clearing away years of scuffs and misguided repairs. Someone once patched a split plank with a glued-on spoon handle. You'd like to believe that was a joke. But deep down, you know it wasn't. You remove the worn floorboards and reinforce the keel beam with new supports. The joints are refitted with marine glue and sealed with pine tar that stains your hands a deep, permanent brown. Pietro calls them gondola hands. You just call them Tuesday. As you work, you talk. About the past week. About the boats you've fixed. About the ones that are still waiting. About Pietro's latest theory. but the shape of a gondola is secretly based on a violin. Think about it, he says. It's curved. It has symmetry. The ferrule is basically a tuning fork. You raise an eyebrow, and the gondolier is ... Still debate whether Venice's love for music directly influenced its boat design. Some point out that Venice produced some of the world's finest violins and composers like Vivaldi. Others believe the resemblance is coincidental form following function in a city where function always includes style. By the end of the day, the training gondola looks ... well recovered. Not beautiful, not fancy, but ready. The kind of boat that will humble every cocky beginner within 3 strokes. You paint a fresh stripe along the rail and Pietro initials the underside, for luck, he says. You know it'll wear off in a week. That's the point. You both stand back, admiring your handiwork. Then Pietro, ever the visionary, asks, what if we started making mini gondolas for kids? Like ... floatable toys. Little ones with tiny oars, you consider it? Not entirely ridiculous. Make one that doesn't flip over and we'll talk. That night, the city is unusually quiet. No parties. No wandering musicians. Just the wind brushing through shuttered windows and the soft sound of canal water finding its way. You lie in bed thinking about the training boat. About how every gondolier in the city probably started in something like her. About how many scraped knees and soaked shoes she witnessed next. And you think about Pietro. About how maybe, just maybe, he's not the worst apprentice you've had. Maybe one day he'll carve his own forcola without asking you which way the grain runs. Maybe one day he'll stop trying to hammer historical artifacts while unsupervised. But not today. You drift off to sleep imagining the sound of sandpaper, the creak of floorboards, and the gentle glide of wood on water. Venice sleeps too. And in the quiet dark, your little workshop hums with the memory of every boat that's ever passed through. There's a knock on the door before dawn, not a polite knock. A desperate one, the kind that says someone is either in love, in debt, or very wet. You open the shop door to find Marco the gondolier with the loudest laugh and the worst timing soaked to the bone, clutching a boat rope in one hand and a broken shoe in the other. She's sinking, he says. You blink. Who? My boat. You glance behind him. Sure enough, his gondola is bobbing alarmingly low in the water, nose tilted like she just lost all hope. Pietro stumbles in behind you, yawning. Did someone say sinking? You all rush down to the dock. The canal's still sleepy, quiet enough that your footsteps echo off the stone. Marco's gondola, an older model named Gianna, is listing hard to one side, water lapping over her edge like it's trying to climb inside. You and Pietro throw ropes across her hull and haul her up onto the slip as fast as you can. She's heavy, not just with water, but with years. Once she's on the dry stand and tilted, you find the culprit, a long crack running down the stern plank. Not obvious unless you were looking for it or trying to win the prize for most catastrophic leak before breakfast. How long has this been here, you ask. Marco shrugs. She was fine yesterday. She wasn't. She just didn't want to worry you. You and Pietro get to work immediately. Marco hovers. Go get breakfast, you tell him. And dry socks? He hesitates, clearly afraid you will replace Gianna's soul with a newer model while he's gone. But eventually he nods and disappears into the mist. You begin by draining the water from her interior with a siphon and towels, drying her boards carefully. Then you trace the full length of the crack about half a meter, hidden under a rib. It's an old wound reopened by stress and maybe an unfortunate hit against a canal step. She's been holding herself together out of loyalty. Pietro murmurs. You nod. They do that. Until they can't. You cut away the weakened plank section and replace it with a precisely carved patch. Walnut, aged, curved with a heat bender to match the flow of the hull. Pietro mixes a special resin glue while you hold the patch flush. Together, you clamp it tight and wait. You think she'd pass inspection after this? He asks. She sigh. She's Gianna. She'd pass on charisma alone. He chuckles, but it's a quiet moment. Gondolas are more than boats to their owners. They're companions. Partners, sometimes even rivals. Losing one even slowly feels like losing a piece of yourself. As the glue cures, you take the chance to clean out the rest of her hull, removing rusted nails, tightening joints, and replacing a few splintered trim boards that have been lazily patched with tape. By mid-morning, she's looking steadier. Her balance is back. Her dignity mostly restored. You reseal the patch with a waterproofing coat, and Pietro paints over the fresh wood with a dark lacquer so well matched, even Gianna would have trouble spotting the difference. Historians still debate how early gondola repairs were documented. Some believe there were official repair yards even in the 1500s, while others argue that gondoliers mostly did their own patchwork with varying degrees of success. What is clear is that the craft of maintaining these elegant boats became more specialized over time because no one wanted to risk being the gondolier whose boat folded in half during a serenade. Just as you're polishing Jaina's bow, Marco returns dry-fed and slightly less dramatic. She looks amazing, he whispers, running a hand along her newly patched side. She's good to go, you say? Just don't ram her into any bridges this week. No promises. Pietro eyes him. We added a tracking chip in the hull. Marco freezes. Seriously? No, you both reply. He launches into a heartfelt thank you speech that includes 2 awkward hugs, a promise to name his next child after you, and an offer to pay you in future favors an unlimited espresso. You decline most of it, but accept the espresso. As Marco rows Gianna away carefully, for once you and Pietro collapse on the dock, feet dangling over the edge. You think we'll ever stop fixing boats? He asks. You look out at the canal where gondolas glide like waterborne commas in a never-ending sentence. No, you say, because the boats won't stop needing it. The afternoon is slow after that. You sharpen tools. You organize the plank scraps into piles based on whether they are still useful or destined to become experimental coffee coasters. Pietro works on his tiny toy gondola again, this time carving a miniature pharaoh from a sliver of brass. You watch him, quietly impressed. You ever think about building a whole one from scratch? He asks. You smile. I think about it every day. He sets down the miniature oar. Then maybe we should. You raise an eyebrow. We? Yeah, you and me. A new one. From nothing. You lean back, stare at the beams above your head, and let the idea float there like a fresh coat of paint. It's ambitious. It's expensive. It's risky. But it's also ... inevitable. Maybe, you say. And Venice just outside the window, still floating, still sighing, seems to nod in agreement. You don't plan for celebrities. Especially not gondola-obsessed, camera-wielding, fur-coat and May celebrities. But today, that's what walks through your workshop door. I want to feel the history, she announces in an accent that drips drama. I want to touch Venice. You glance at Pietro, who is mid-sandpaper swipe, frozen like a lizard caught in lamplight. She steps forward with a theatrical sweep of her silk scarf. They told me you're the one, the boat whisperer. You sigh. They lied. Her name is Allegra de Luna, actress, pop icon, once posed with a tiger on a jet ski, and apparently she wants a gondola. Not to ride, to own. Specifically, a custom gondola that feels like the Renaissance met outer space and had a baby on a moonlit canal. You nod slowly. We do classic repair work. She smiles sweetly. I'll pay double. You nod again. We also do inspired commissions. And just like that, you're designing the most ridiculous boat of your career. It starts with sketches. Allegra wants deep purple velvet seats, a gilded pharaoh shaped like a phoenix, and hidden LED lighting, so it glows like hope. She wants carved cherubs. She wants a built-in champagne cooler. She wants her initials, Lila. Inlaid in mother-of-pearl on the deck, you take notes, you try not to cry. Pietro watches in fascinated horror. I think I'm having an art attack, he whispers. She's paying triple now, you whisper back. And so you begin. The base hull is one of your old restorations, a boat you intended to donate to a museum, now sacrificed to this glittering, surreal project. You sand it down, reinforce the ribs, and begin building up the luxury nightmare Allegra described. You try to stay grounded. You use traditional techniques, hand-carved woodwork, real brass accents, aged mahogany floorboards. But around it, you let the ridiculousness bloom. Pietro sculpts phoenix wings into the Pharaoh with a rotary tool. You inlay her initials using shell pieces sourced from a Murano glassmaker who still thinks you re-joking. Each evening, you both collapse on the workbench, covered in gold dust and regret. Are we still gondola craftsmen? Pietro asks. We're gondola artists now, you reply. Starving artists. Except for the starving part. Historians still debate when gondolas shifted from practical to performative. Some believe it started when foreign royalty began requesting private rides in the 18th century. Others say it happened much earlier when Venice leaned into spectacle as a defense against decay. Either way, today's gondolas are as much about theater as they are about transport. Allegra returns for progress check-ins that are really just photo shoots. She poses dramatically beside the frame. She insists on stroking the oar like it's a cat. She films a TikTok where she claims to have rebirthed Venetian glory with modern feminist energy. You try not to throw a clamp. But somewhere beneath all the glitz you find yourself oddly proud. Because the boat still floats. Because you built her with the same tools, the same patience, the same reverence as Rosa or Gianna or the training gondola. Because under the velvet, under the LEDs, she's still wood and breath and memory. And Venice has always been about contradiction, elegance and rot, glory and grime. Cherubs and champagne coolers. The final day arrives. You and Pietro polish every inch. You balance her weight with subtle lead ballast so she won't tell under camera equipment. You test her glide in the canal at dawn when the light turns water into gold. She moves perfectly. Allegra arrives in a gown that could double as a small tent. She gasps, cries, and christens the gondola with a bottle of French sparkling water that costs more than your lave. She's beautiful, she says. She's yours, you reply. Then she adds, now I just need to learn how to row. You and Pietro exchange a glance. Training package is extra, he says smoothly. As Allegra drifts off into the canal posing, waving, already composing her next post, you lean on the dock and exhale. Pietro claps you on the back. So ... would you do it again? You think. You smile. You lie. Absolutely not. But later, in the workshop, you place her final sketch on the wall next to all the others next to the grandfather's boat. Next to Rosa, next to your dream build that's still just a rough outline. Because in its own weird, glittering way, Allegra's gondola is part of the story now too. And Venice? Venice has always had room for drama. Every now and then, you get a visitor who doesn't say much. Not a celebrity, not a gondolier. Just someone who steps inside, breathes in the scent of resin and wood dust, and quietly walks the perimeter of the shop like they're visiting a church. This morning, it's an older man. Weathered hands, neatly pressed trousers, and a wool cap that's seen decades of sun and salt. You don't interrupt. Pietro glances up from sharpening an oar but says nothing. The man walks slowly around Rosa, runs his fingers along the edge of a freshly lacquered stern, then stops at your rack of half-finished forcola. He finally speaks. Used to do this? A long time ago, you nod. Welcome back. His name is Vittorio. 85 years old. Former gondola builder back when there were dozens of them, not just a handful. He doesn't brag, doesn't offer long stories. But there's something in the way he touches the wood that says, I remember how this feels. He stays all morning. Helps without asking, just shifts from bench to bench, checking your work, tapping joints with a practiced ear, humming little bits of old songs that only people who worked with their hands ever seem to know. Pietro follows him around like a duckling. You ever build a double keel? He asks. Vittorio chuckles. Once, never again. They laugh. You hand him a block plane without a word. He tests the blade edge with his thumb, makes a face, and sharpens it sharper than you thought possible. Then hands it back. This is good, he says. And coming from him, it feels like a medal. Around noon, you all sit outside with paper-wrapped sandwiches and little plastic cups of espresso. The canal flows past like it always has, like it always will, ignoring the changes on its banks. Why'd you stop? Pietro finally asks him. Vittorio shrugs. The city changed. The world sped up. I slowed down. He gestures at your shop. But I see you haven't. You pause. We try not to. He studies you for a moment. You're doing it right, he says. It's not about the boats. It's about what they remember. Historians still debate whether the true skill of the gondola craftsman is technical or cultural. Some claim the work is about precision, about weight distribution, curvature, and balance. Others insist about storytelling, each curve and cut holding onto centuries of memory. You've always believed it's both. That afternoon, you let Vittorio take the lead on shaping a new prow for an upcoming build. Pietro watches every move, every pass of the plane, every subtle check for symmetry. He asks questions only once. Vittorio answers every time. You pretend not to watch, but you are. Closely, by day's end, the prow is perfect. Not flashy, not showy. Just right. Vittorio sets the tool down, stretches his back, and nods toward the door. Gotta catch the vaporetto before it gets full. You walk him to the dock. He shakes your hand firmly, then Pietro's. This is good work, he says. Keep listening to the boats. You nod. Always. As he walks away, his pace slow but steady, Pietro says, he's like a living blueprint. You smile. He's what we're trying to preserve. Later that night, the shop is still. The tools are back on their pegs. The breeze carries in the sounds of a band playing somewhere across the lagoon. You sit in the workshop, staring at the prow Vittorio shaped. You run your fingers along the edge. It's smooth, balanced, confident. You know it will hold. That night, you dream of sawdust and laughter and old men who don't need to talk to teach. And when you wake, you get straight to work. Because the boats are waiting. Venice is loud in the morning. Not with cars or alarms, but with footsteps echoing across bridges, seagulls arguing like they've paid rent, and boat engines coughing to life in the distance. You get used to it. Or maybe it just becomes part of your rhythm. But today, something's different. You step outside the shop, and the air is electric. Not stormy celebratory, banners hang from windows. Flags flutter in reds and golds. Somewhere someone's beating a drum very enthusiastically and very offbeat. Pietro pops his head out beside you. Is it a holiday? You squint across the canal. Festa del Redentore, you mutter. Already? Ah yes, the Feast of the Redeemer. Venice's very Venetian way of saying thank you for not dying in the plague. Now let's build a temporary bridge and light things on fire. For one weekend each July, Venice builds a floating pontoon bridge to connect the Zatter to the Redentore Church on Giudecca. Fireworks, feasts, gondola parades, it's one of the rare times the city feels like a village again. You weren't planning on taking part, but Venice has other plans. By mid-morning, you get the call. One of the ceremonial gondolas, not yours, but one you've worked on in the past, has split a railing. Just in time for the big procession. They need it by sunset, says the voice on the other end. Of course they do. You hang up, turn to Pietro. We've got a party to save. The gondola arrives shortly after Toad in a panic, draped like a fainting opera singer. She's an old celebratory vessel, still bearing traces of Baroque detailed golden edges, sculpted swans, even velvet side trim. Her left side rail has cracked clean through, probably from being leaned on by too many people with too many spritzes. She's fancy, Pietro says, peering over the edge. She's fragile, you correct. And she has about 6 hours to look flawless. You spring into motion. First, you remove the broken section, a carved rail with floral details that someone clearly copied from a church altar. You stabilize the area with clamps while Pietro digs through the scrap wood to find the right match. It's cherrywood aged, probably salvaged from a dismantled doorframe. You shave it down slowly, copying the floral scrollwork with your smallest chisels. The air in the shop is tense but focused. Every second counts, but every cut has to be precise. This isn't just a repair, it's a patch on Venice's public face. The boat will be photographed, televised, maybe even blessed. Think anyone will notice it's a replacement? Pietro asks. Only us, you reply. Which is enough. By mid-afternoon, the new rail is in place, stained and sealed. You test its strength with a gentle press, no movement, no creak. The gondola gets a quick polish, and then you both carry your tools to the dock to reinstall the rail with all the gravity of a coronation. Just before sunset, a team arrives to escort her back to the procession lineup. You and Pietro walk behind her as she floats down the canal, restored and glowing, catching light from the water like a floating chandelier. Historians still debate whether the Festa del Redentore began as a sincere act of faith or a desperate attempt to out-celebrate tragedy. In 1577, Venice promised to build a church in exchange for deliverance from the plague, and when the sickness passed, they kept that promise. The annual celebration remains, centuries later, a mix of reverence, relief, and pure theatrical joy. You and Pietro follow the procession all the way to the temporary bridge, where hundreds of people are already walking across to the church. You pause, watching from the shadows, sawdust still clinging to your sleeves. Fireworks begin just as the gondolas line up. You lean on the stone railing, watching the colors explode in the sky, reflected in the ripples below. Pietro nudges you. You ever ride in the procession? You shake your head. Always behind it, never in it. He looks thoughtful. Maybe next year. You both sit on the dock for a long while after the crowds disperse. Bits of confetti float on the surface of the water. A stray song drifts down from a balcony above. You close your eyes. You imagine what it might be like just once to ride in the celebration you always serve. Not as a fixer, not as a watcher, but as part of the procession. Maybe someday? For now, you have a workshop to clean, tools to oil, and a slice of leftover Festa cake that Pietro may or may not have hidden in the toolbox. Venice sleeps off her party. And you, the quiet mechanic of floating memories, drift home with the soft sound of fireworks still echoing in your ears. There's a part of the canal that most gondoliers avoid. Not because it's haunted, though some would claim it is, but because it's too narrow, too shaded, and too full of debris. Locals call it il gomito, the elbow, for the sharp bend that feels more like turning inside a Venetian closet than navigating open water. But today you go there on purpose. Because today you're recovering a gondola that got stuck during a misguided romantic shortcut. She said she wanted a quieter route, explains the red-faced gondolier who called you for help. I didn't think she meant Death Trap Alley. You smile politely. You're lucky you didn't wedge the whole boat like a cork. The stuck gondola is named Luna, not particularly old, not particularly well made. One of the newer fiberglass reinforced models that some companies started producing for rentals. Lighter, cheaper, louder. And unfortunately, less charming. You and Pietro maneuver through El Ganito using your small workboat. You reach Luna, who's wedged between the stone wall and an underwater pipe, her starboard rail scraped and her floorboards soggy. You inspect the damage. The hull is bruised but intact. However, one side has splintered badly, and the bottom has taken on more water than it should have. Pietro raises an eyebrow. You think she's worth saving? You sigh. They're all worth saving. He grins. Even the plastic ones? You groan. Especially the plastic ones. They have no idea what they're doing. You lash Luna to the side of your boat, slowly prying her loose. It's a delicate operation involving poles, rope, and several shouted warnings about submerged flower pots. Finally, she comes free with a satisfying squelch. Back at the shop, you hoist her out of the water, draining the canal from her belly like someone wringing out a sponge. The repair begins. Luna is different to work with. Her frame lacks the rich complexity of traditional woodwork, no elegant grain to follow, no warm scent of walnut or ash. Just the cold, stubborn bite of synthetic materials. You don't carve her. You sand, mold, reinforce. You patch your fiberglass hull with resin and sheets of mesh, applying heat to cure it into shape. It's all precise work, but it feels sterile. Still, she deserves to float. Venice, for all its elegance, isn't precious about practicality. It adapts. Over centuries, the city has absorbed Turkish traders, Austrian governors, Napoleonic orders, and TikTok influencers. So why not plastic gondolas? Historians still debate whether modern gondolas should be considered part of the city's cultural heritage. Some purists argue only the traditional handcrafted wooden gondolas qualify. Others suggest that as long as a boat glides down a Venetian canal with elegance and purpose, it belongs. You sit on the bench, hands sticky with resin, looking at Luna's odd shape. She's not pretty, you say? Pietro shrugs. Neither is Marco, but we still fix his boat. Touché. As the repairs finish, you decide to give her something extra. A small carved trim detail. Just a whisper of old-world design, an echo of the past on a very modern vessel. Pietro raises an eyebrow as you glue it in place. She's gonna think she's a real gondola now. She's a real gondola. Even with that speaker system? You pause. Okay, a slightly confused one. By dusk, Luna floats again. You take her for a test glide through a quiet stretch of canal. She moves awkwardly at first, unsure, like a baby flamingo learning to skate, but she steadies, finds her rhythm. You think back to your first boat. The clumsy one. The one you patched 100 times before she stopped creaking like an old chair. You think about how every boat starts off wrong in some way and how that's part of what makes them yours. Pietro joins you on the return glide. You sit in silence for a bit, the oars gently dipping into the soft green canal. Then he says, you know, you could have refused this job. No one would have blamed you. You nod, but she would have sunk. You dock Luna, secure her ropes, and leave her waiting for her next spin around the city. As you step onto the dock, you glance at her stern where the tiny carved trim catches the last rays of light. It's a small thing, barely visible, but enough to remind her and anyone looking that someone believed she was worth it. And in Venice, that's all a boat really needs. Some days you build, some days you repair, and some days you just wait. This is one of those days. The weather's turned low clouds, moody drizzle, the kind of gray that hangs over Venice like a damp blanket. Not enough rain to cancel work, but just enough to make wood swell and glue sulk. You stare at the half-finished forcola on the bench. It's not cooperating today. Every cut feels wrong. Every curve feels forced. Pietro stands nearby, attempting to sketch out a gondola design on a piece of scrap plywood. It's supposed to be elegant and aerodynamic, but it looks suspiciously like a banana with attitude. Maybe we should just go home, he mutters. You consider it, but instead you reach for the oil can and begin lubricating your hand tools one by one. Because sometimes that's all you can do. Sharpen the tools, clean the bench, make space for the next moment that does work. While you're cleaning, you notice something strange. A familiar piece of wood tucked in the scrap bin. It has the last bit of a project you started years ago, a custom gondola frame that never got finished. Commission canceled, design abandoned, but the ripped piece in your hands is beautiful. Bent just right. Still holding its shape. You place it on the bench. Remember this one? You ask Pietro. He squints. Wasn't that the one with the inlay compass? You nod. Client wanted to sail it across the Adriatic. In a gondola. Smart. He got as far as Murano and gave up. You both laugh. Then you stop laughing. You stare at the piece of wood. And without even saying it aloud, you both know what's happening. It's time. You're going to build your gondola. Not a repair job, not a commission. Not a patchwork of someone else's dream. But the one you've been thinking about since the day you picked up your first chisel. You move quickly. Clear the bench. Pull out your personal stash of walnut aged 10 years, perfectly dried. Pietro rolls out a fresh sheet of paper and starts sketching more seriously now, his banana days behind him. The design is subtle, slightly narrower, elegant curve at the stern, balanced for single-person rowing, but with enough space for one rider to lean back and pretend they reef 400 years late for a masquerade ball. You start by tracing the rib layout. Each rib will define the shape, the soul of the boat. You work with confidence, but not haste. The rain outside taps gently against the roof like applause from the sky. You both fall silent. There's something ceremonial about this moment. You're not fixing anymore. You're not reacting. You're creating. Pietro cuts a brace piece while you measure the bow angle. You're communicating in head nods now, in pencil taps and shared glances. This is what people don't always understand about craftsmanship. It's not just about skill. It's about rhythm, timing, patience, and knowing when the boat is ready to exist. Historians still debate when the first modern gondola was built in this form but asymmetrical hull. The precise measurements, the elegant curve that leans just slightly left. Some trace it to the 17th century, others earlier. But all agree, the gondola is not just a boat, it's a decision. A philosophy carved into wood. You keep working until your hands cramp and the light fades. The rib frame takes shape, each beam locked into place like bones in a skeleton that's been waiting for its skin. By the time you're done for the day, it stands there bare, beautiful and complete. You both sit quietly, staring at it. It needs a name, Pietro says. You nod. You think about all the boats that have come through your doors, about Rosa, about Giona, about Luna and Allegra's Phoenix gondola and the training boat with the crooked floor. You think about your grandfather. And then you say, let's wait, she'd tell us. That night, you close the shop with a different kind of exhaustion. Not the sore bones fatigue of a long day's labor, but the quiet ache of something beginning. The rain has stopped. Venice glistens, reflective, like she's holding her breath. And somewhere deep in the canals the boat is waiting to be born. It's raining today, the soft kind of Venetian rain that drizzles more than it falls, settling on stone and water alike, turning everything silver. You've always liked this weather. The tourists thin out, the gondoliers wear ponchos. And the city smells like wet rope and stories. You unlock the workshop, flip on the lights, and pause. Because sitting on the workbench is something that wasn't there yesterday. A gift, wrapped in newspaper, tied with boat string. Pietro's handwriting on the note. Don't eat open until you've had coffee. You roll your eyes, make a coffee anyway, and then unwrap it. It asks his toy gondola, the one he's been working on in the corners of the shop between real jobs. But now it's finished. Fully painted, varnished, the furrow polished to a tiny shine. A little suited figure inside wears your usual shirt and cap. He even carved in your nose, unfairly large. You laugh. On the bottom, he's etched. To the boat whisperer. I'll be back. You place it on the shelf next to your grandfather's photo. It fits. The morning passes slowly. Rain taps the window. A seagull tries to land on Rosa and slips off. You sharpen chisels just for the rhythm. You straighten the clamps, sweep the floor. It's the first day you've worked alone in months. And yet, the shop isn't empty. It never really is. You start in on a quiet project, replacing the inner rail of an older gondola you've been meaning to fix, one of your favorites. She doesn't have a name. Never did. Just a shape you've always liked, something about the way she cuts the water even when standing still. As you carve, your mind drifts. You remember your first week in the shop, when the air smelled overwhelming and the wood didn't yet respond to your hands, when you got your thumb stuck in a clamp, when you accidentally glued a measuring tape to the hull, when you almost quit. And now here you are, older, maybe wiser, still missing Pietro's clattering tool habits already. You keep working through the afternoon. The rain eventually stops, but the streets stay slick and mirror-like. Venice always reflects herself better after a storm. Later, someone knocks on the open door. You look up. A young woman, maybe 20, holding a folded note and an awkward expression. Are you the gondola repair guy? She asks. You nod. I have an old boat, she says. It belonged to my grandfather. I don't think it floats anymore. You set your tools down gently. Bring it here, you say. Let's see what she remembers. Because every boat remembers something. Because you never really stop repairing, just like Venice never stops floating. And because someone has to keep listening. Always. And so another day in Venice draws to a close. The skies turn lavender, fading into a quiet dusk that softens every edge. The canals have slowed, fewer ripples, fewer voices. Just the gentle lapping of water against wood, the faint creak of distant moorings, and the hum of the city settling down. Inside the shop, the tools are back in their places. The brushes are cleaned, the shavings swept into the corner bin. The frame of the new gondola rests under a canvas sheet, quiet, patient, taking shape day by day. The toy gondola still sits on the shelf. It catches the last rays of light from the high window, gleaming faintly. Below it, the photograph of your grandfather smiles in black and white, the eyes still knowing, still watching. Outside, a few late gondoliers drift past, their oars dipping in rhythm, their silhouettes like slow ink on water. You sit by the door, a warm mug in your hands, and breathe in the scent of varnish and rain. You've fixed boats that were broken. You've restored pieces of history that nearly slipped away. You've worked beside masters and amateurs, legends and tourists, dreamers and skeptics. And through it all, you've done what Venice has always done. You've endured, you've floated. And you've made space for beauty even when the world rushed past in a hurry. Now the lights dim, the breeze grows cooler, and your eyelids, like the doors of the shop, slowly begin to close. There's nothing left to fix tonight, only stories to remember and dreams to row gently toward. Good night.